Dear students, today let us learn about Darwin's theory of evolution. Darwinism is an evolutionary theory which is proposed by Charles Darwin. It is the term coined for the explanations offered by Darwin for the origin of species by natural selection. Darwin is considered as father of evolution. Here, Darwinism does not exactly mean what evolution is, but it explains how evolution might have occurred in nature. This was beautifully explained in a book called Origin of Species by Natural Selection. Darwin suggested that natural selection is the mechanism by which species evolve over geologic times. He proposed descent with modification. According to this, all organisms on earth are related through some unknown ancestral type that lived long ago. What inspired Darwin's thinking? Darwin's thinking is much influenced by mainly three publications. Some of them are An Essay on the Principles of Population by Thomas Malthus, which states that animals increases in geometric progression whereas their food sources increase in arithmetic progression. So, for ever increasing population, the food sources are not sufficient. It leads to competition among individuals. Second thing is Principles of Geology by Charles Lyell, which explains the phenomena of gradualism. That means Earth has changed slowly and gradually through ages. These two theories mainly influence Darwin's thinking and it leads to the discovery of natural selection. Now let us see what is evolution. Evolution means change over time. It is unfolding. Darwin developed the biological theory of evolution that explains how modern organisms evolved over long periods of time through descent from common ancestors. If you see, human beings has evolved from his ancestors like monkeys and chimpanzees. Now let us have a look at a history of Darwin studies. Darwin got an opportunity to travel by HMS Beagle, which means His Majesty ship Beagle, and traveled to the Galapagos Islands in the year 1831. He particularly liked and observed the finches in Galapagos Islands. He also observed the tortoises on different islands. He observed each different group had its own nick. We know what is nick. Nick is nothing but position and function of an organism in the environment. He studied 13 different species and saw how they adapted to their environment. If you see, all these are the Darwin's finches which he observed in Galapagos Islands. They may be small ground finches, they may be medium ground finches, large ground finches, cactus finches, sharp beaked ground finches, small tree finches, large tree finches, vegetarian finches, like that, woodpecker finches. So he observed different types of finches in Galapagos Islands. And all these observations leads to the book Origin of Species by Darwin. So Darwin developed mainly two ideas. One is evolution explains life's unity and diversity, and natural selection is the cause of adaptive evolution. This is the original book Origin of Species documented by Darwin. Now let us see what are the major facts and observations of Darwin's theory of evolution. First one is overproduction or prodigality of production. Second one is competition. Third one is genetic variation. Fourth one is adaptation. Fifth one is natural selection. And sixth one is speciation. Let us see one by one. First one is overproduction or prodigality of production. Here most species produce far more offsprings than are needed to maintain the population. It means every living being have an innate desire of producing their own progeny for the continuity of race. More individuals of each kind are produced than could possibly survive. this tendency of multiplication were unchecked, in a very short time the earth would be overcrowded with organisms. For example, if you take the smallest unicellular organism, paramecium, divides by binary fission. It divides 3 to 4 times per day. At this rate, the mass of protoplasm equals to 10,000 times of the volume of earth at the end of 9,000 generation. And if we take salmon fish, it produces 28 millions of eggs in a season, and starfish produces 1 million of eggs in a season. And if there is no natural check, all the seas will be filled with them in a few generations. But it is not happening because species population remains more or less constant, because a small fraction of offsprings live long enough to reproduce. Here, there is always a check on the biotic potential of living organisms by carrying capacity of the environment. Next, because of this overproduction among the individuals, it leads to competition between the members of same species, or between the members of different species, or between the individuals and environment. This competition, if we observe, living space and food are limited. So, offsprings from each generation must compete among themselves in order to live. In this struggle, only a small fraction can possibly survive long enough to reproduce. If we see here, there are two giraffes. One is long neck giraffe and another one is short neck giraffe. In order to get food, a long neck giraffe is able to get the food material which is present on the upper surface of trees, whereas the short neck giraffe is not in a position to get the food. So, in this competition, only the long neck giraffe can win the competition over the short neck giraffe. Now, let us see genetic variations. We know what are variations. Variations are nothing but differences between the members of same species or different species. If we see, no two organisms are exactly similar, even though identical twins. This shows variations. That means, if we observe, even the offsprings of the same parents, they are different. These variations may be sometimes useful or harmful. And these differences are considered to be variations within the species, because if we observe these birds' beaks, these beaks, some of the beaks are very long and some of the beaks are very short and some of the beaks are in medium sized. The different shapes and sizes of beaks are due to the type of food material which they are eating and the nature of food habit. So, all these variations makes the organism to better survive. If the organism has a better variations to that environment, they can easily survive. And if they don't have better variations, they cannot survive. They has to be perished from the nature. So variations plays a very important role in the adaptation of animals in the nature. Next, survival of the fittest. Darwin felt that there must be a connection between an animal's environment and how it survives. Here, ability to survive and reproduce in a specific environment is called fitness. And this fitness depends upon how well an organism is suited for its environment. Fitness is the result of adaptation. So, adaptation is the ability of our organism to adjust to the changing environmental conditions. Those organisms which has better adaptations as per the changes in the environment, they have a more chance to survive when compared to their counterparts. If we take this adaptation in camel, Adaptation is an inherited trait that increases an organism's chance of survival and reproduction in a given environment. Now let us see how a camel is adapted to survive in the desert. Here, camel can store large amount of water in the fat in their humps. They have feet with large surface area to allow them to walk on sand. They also have long eyes. They also have long eyelashes to stop sand blowing into their eyes. All these adaptations having huge hump to store large amount of water for longer time and have long feet with surface area. This also allows them to walk on the surface of land. So all these are the adaptations of the camel to survive in desert. So these adaptations are mainly useful for the organisms whether to survive according to the changes in the environment or to perish from the environment, which will be decided by the nature. Ultimate natural selection. Here, nature, environment selects living organisms with better suited inherited traits to survive and reproduce. The variations caused by different factors within a species, for example, if you take giraffe, may make them better equipped for survival. Here, offsprings inherit these better traits, and as a whole, the population improves for that particular environment. If we take natural selection, this natural selection does not move in a predetermined direction. The changing earth determines what will and can survive. If we take the examples for natural selection, ostrich. These, ostriches are the biggest birds, and these ostriches are the fastest birds on the land due to favorable traits such as long and powerful legs. Their legs are very long and powerful, so which helps them to be as the fastest birds on the earth. Next, a water bird. Here, water bird has long legs. This water bird has long legs. This happens because the animal kept wading in a deeper water to get food. So all these are the adaptations for the animals to adjust according to their environment where they are living. Next one is speciation. What is speciation? Let us see. Over many generations, favorable adaptations, that means the adaptations which are suitable for a particular environment gradually accumulate in a species, and unfavorable ones in a particular environment disappear. Eventually, accumulated changes become so great as a result a new species forms. So, formation of a new species is called speciation, and it takes many generations to do the same. So, the four factors which was explained by Darwin is overproduction, competition, genetic variation, and natural selection. So, biological evolution is a consequence of these four factors. They work together to impact any living population. If we observe the natural selection flow chart, population of an organisms, they produce enormous amount of their own offsprings because perpetuation of self and continuity of life is the inner tendency of every living being. Whenever there is a overproduction, this overproduction leads to struggle for existence. This struggle is of three types, as we all know. This may be intraspecific struggle or interspecific struggle or struggle with the environment. In the intraspecific struggle, the competition is found among the individuals of the same species. It may be for food, shelter, and mate, and it's the most severe check on the rate of reproduction. And another one is interspecies struggle. It is the competition found among the animals of different species. Most of the species have the same type of food habits. Hence, generally competition exists among them chiefly for the food and shelter. And another one is struggle with the environment. Here, all living organisms struggle with the adverse environmental conditions like maybe cyclones, floods, or earthquakes, volcanoes, eruptions, or whatever it may be. So, in this struggle, the organisms which has better variations has the chance to survive. As already we have discussed, variations are nothing but dissimilarities between the members of same species. There may be favorable variations and unfavorable variations in a particular environment. It means a variation which is favorable in a particular environment may not be favorable in another environment. So those organisms which has favorable variations in a particular environment, they have a differences in the reproductive success, and which will be ultimately leads to the evolution of adaptations, which leads to the formation of new species. So these are the main postulates of the Darwin's theory of evolution. That means every living being has the innate ability to produce more number of offsprings, but all the offsprings which are produced by the organisms are not survived, because there is always a check on the rate of reproduction by carrying capacity of the earth. Only the limited members can survive. So who is going to select what sort of organism has to survive, what sort of organism has to perish from the nature, is decided by nature according to Darwin's theory. That's why this theory is also called as Darwin's theory of natural selection. Now let us see what are the major objections to the theory of evolution by natural selection. Darwin's theory stresses upon small fluctuating variations which are largely not heritable and play no part in evolution. It does not explain the effect of use and disuse and presence of vestigial organs, because if we take human being, there are nearly 180 vestigial organs. Darwin does not explain anything regarding these vestigial organs. If nature is selecting only the favorable variations, these vestigial organs might not have existed in human being or in some other animals. Next, Darwin failed to differentiate between the somatic and germinal variations and considered all variations are heritable, but only the germinal variations have the possibility to be transferred from the next generations. But Darwin does not differentiate between the somatic variations and germinal variations. It explains the survival of the fittest, but not the arrival of the fittest. Darwin's theory explains the survival of the fittest, but he does not explain anything regarding the arrival of the fittest. And natural selection does not account how an organ can be useful in initial stages. Natural selection could not explain the evolution of terrestrial animals from aquatic forms. Darwin proposed artificial selections for improving races of domestic plants and animals, but these could never lead to permanent variations. It could not tell whether instincts are acquired and modified through natural selection or not. So, these are some of the objections to the Darwin's theory of evolution, and all these objections are taken by another scientists in neo-Darwinism. They explained what are the drawbacks in the Darwinism, and it leads to the discovery of modern synthetic theory of evolution, which also called as neo-Darwinism. Thank you.